This is Dateline News and Conversation. Got another really interesting guest for you tonight. But first of all, I've been asking this question the last few shows. Are you tired of Trump, his wars, his lies, his flip flops, his contradictions? Are you tired of all the bad news? Are you worried about the economy? Are you feeling overwhelmed? Well, here's where hope can be found with some of these guests that I've had recently. And tonight, I'm very happy to welcome to the show a newcomer. Uh, he just celebrated his 91st birthday, Mr. Jack Gilroy. Jack, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Regis. I'm really pleased to be on with you. I've known of you for many, many years, but now I have an opportunity to talk with you and hopefully many other people.
Well, I'm sure that people are going to find your story to be very not only interesting but inspirational. Now, you and I have had quite a challenge uh, getting to tonight. Today, in your case, it's noontime there. Um you've had all kinds of problems with your camera. That I knew you were logged in, but no camera, no microphone. You ended up having to buy a new computer. You had to take it back to the dealer and say, "Look, you got to help me figure this out. My microphone and my camera just don't get recognized." So I'm really happy that you've had the patience to do this, because I've been looking forward to this interview, Jack, for quite some time now. So I mentioned that you just celebrated your 91st birthday. Darn, look at you! You got more hair. Um, you look younger than I look, and you're 10 years older than me. Man, you've got some good genes. Or do you smoke or anything like that?
No, no, I think everybody back in the 50s and 60s did a bit, and it didn't last for long for me.
Wow. Well, anyway, I don't smoke, and I haven't smoked probably, I don't know, 40 years at least. Um, but anyway, you look great. I'm happy to have you on the show. Now, what I'm going to mention first of all is that you have been a lifelong, and I would have to say radical activist, anti war, anti colonialism, um, probably not too happy with the United States government, as I am not happy at all with the United States government. So, in order to introduce you to my audience, I would like you to tell me a little bit about your background, where you grew up, when you grew up, your family, if you had any siblings. Um, you were actually 10 years old during World War II, and I know that that did have some kind of an effect on you. So let's begin by telling me a little bit about your background.
Sure. I was born in Carbondale, Pennsylvania, and Carbondale is a anthracite hard coal town. Actually, the first hard coal city in the United States with the first railroad, a gravity railroad that got the coal out from the mines over to the Delaware River and to ports around the world. My father was a machinist on the railroad. Had served in World War I on some of the earliest aircraft in the Navy, looking for German submarines. He later said he's glad they never found any. He said he could just imagine what would have happened to the submariners if they dropped one of the bombs that they had handheld bombs at the time. My mother graduated from high school when she was 16 and took a train to Chicago, where she worked for about 5 years for Montgomery Ward. Came back, met my father, and they married, I think, in 1927. And my oldest brother, Joe, was born in 1928, and then Bob in 32, and then me in 35. Of course, it was the heart of the Depression. Their parents had many children, 8 and 9, but things settled down by the 1930s in Depression time.
Right, well, tell me what it was like growing up in Carbondale, Pennsylvania, in a a mining town. But what was well, your early remembrances of school? You went to what kind of schools did you go to? Grammar school, high
Well, I
school,
went, the
etc.
first year was the public school, yeah. But to answer your question about the town, which is interesting, people can find out more about it in my first novel, which is Absolute Flanagan. I called the town Wirtsville, which actually was the first name of Carbondale. But the uh, the people in it, some of them have different names because there are some true characters. It is a book of fiction, a historical novel of the World War II period. And yes, I was 10 years old at the time of the dropping of the atomic bomb. And I remember from earlier years uh, being happy about the fact that they reported about our blockbuster bombs, meaning they could blow whole blocks in Europe apart with one bomb. And as kids, we thought that was pretty cool. That was okay. There was no sense of compassion taught. In the school that I went to, it was a public school. There was little sense of that at all going on. I often tell people that the day of infamy for me was not December 7th, but December 8th, because Miss Kirkwood, our teacher, asked us what happened the day before. And so Sunday, December 7th, as every Sunday, actually, I was with my grandparents and my uncles for Sunday dinner. And the word came over the radio that Pearl Harbor had been bombed. And I heard a lot of words spoken by uncles that I didn't recognize, but I used the following day when Miss Kirkwood said, "Class, what happened yesterday?" I raised my hand and I said, those goddamn Japs, the bastards, they bombed Pearl Harbor. And she rushed down and grabbed me by the earlobe, marched me up, and told me to go home and have my mouth cleaned out with Feld's Napta. If any of your listeners wonder what that is, it was the roughest laundry soap that you could find at the time. My
Jack,
mother
Jack,
marched me back.
let
Okay,
me interrupt you. We
sure,
just had another interruption there, and I don't know whether it got recorded. Could you repeat uh, what you heard your uncles say, and then you went to school the next day, and your teacher asked you whatever you thought about it? Can you just repeat that,
sure,
please?
sure. At my grandparents' house, I heard my uncles use some interesting words I hadn't heard before when we learned that the Japanese had bombed Pearl Harbor. The radio was on. And the next day, Miss Kirkwood, my first grade teacher, asked the class, "What happened yesterday?" I immediately raised my hand and I said, "Those goddamn Japs, the bastards, they bombed Pearl Harbor." And she rushed down, grabbed me by the earlobe, marched me to the front of the class, and said, "You're to go home and have your mouth washed out with Feld's Napta," which of course was the harshest laundry soap. My mother saw me crying next door in the bushes, and she came over and found out what happened and marched me back to school. Told me to take my seat, and went out and really chewed out Miss Kirkwood. It was my first sort of feeling of justice done, Uh, and so that was a good memory. I have a better memory of December 8th than I do of December 7th.
You grew up probably you're Irish. Probably a lot of Irishmen in your town. Did you grow up Catholic or
Yeah.
Protestant or what?
No,
What?
I grew up Catholic. In fact, after the first year at the public school, Lincoln School, where the janitor, because I was late on a couple of occasions, would put a pliers to my nose and march me to the teacher, and the teacher would thank him, and then I would get in my. I told my parents that, and they decided they better send me to a Catholic school. Well, I did. I started second grade in St. Rose Academy, which was a small and very poor school. The only thing we had was basketball, but no basketball court. We had to use a court downtown. So there were no today, of course, with 15 or more sports in the school, you'd be an athlete. I became a more or less a ground a neighborhood athlete in baseball and football, but I was never really a truly good athlete. I wasn't that good in basketball to be on the team. They had a real crackerjack team that went on the state championships, and I didn't. I didn't participate in that an awful lot. So yeah, it was an education, Catholic education. And keep in mind that the early years we sang songs like Praise the Lord and Pass the Ammunition and Onward Christian Soldiers. There was never a mention of anti-war. It was just natural that it was about war. And if you want me to tell you something about the anti-communist and anti-Russian, anti-Chinese, I could speak a bit about that as well. But that's a
Yeah,
long story.
yeah, no, go ahead, because I think that's part of what I'm going to want to talk with you about in the future. It's the way most Americans have been propagandized from their earliest years, and it goes back uh, many decades before you and I ever came along. So go ahead. What were you brainwashed with?
Oh well, basically that the Russians were not only communists but also godless. Right? They were all atheists, pretty much. There was never really any mention of the Russian Orthodox Church and the Christian background of Russia. It was that they were atheistic, Marxist, Leninist, Trotskyites, etc. That we had to be aware of. And even this was even during the time that, of course, Russia was actually winning the war. I remember, I'm old enough to remember the Battle of Stalingrad. I remembered all that stuff as a kid, not only Pearl Harbor, but Stalingrad and all the horrible things that happened to the Russians. So that I was always pretty much of a doubter as a kid with not only the story of religion, but also the story of politics. And our town was pretty much controlled by an Irish mafia. If you ask about a lot of Irish in town, the Irish mafia were, of course, balanced a bit by the Protestants who owned the mines and owned the factories. In fact, there was only one factory in town. They made perforated metal, and up until World War II, if you were a Catholic, you could not work there. It was only Protestants who were allowed to work there. And so the whole history of economics became interesting to me, where the Irish gained control of the political control of town because they had more children than the Protestants, right? And they became the policemen, the mayor, and the council, and they operated nonviolently. But if you didn't pay your fee, if you were an ashman, that is a person who collected ashes, people burned coal to heat their homes, or a garbage man, or if you were a school teacher or a cop, you had to pay. I found that out when I graduated from the University of Scranton, a Jesuit university, and I wanted to apply for a job teaching history in my hometown. And I was told that there was a job available in just $1,000 in cash in a plain envelope, no writing on it, and given to a certain person who happened to be president of the school board, and I would have the job. So, of course, I neither had the money nor the will to operate on that, and I ventured myself to teach in other places.
Uh, wow, you were. Tell me about your college education.
Well, it resulted because of the economic draft. In high school I had joined the Naval Reserve, and then I transferred to because I heard that the Korean Bill was going to be going out of commission, and I didn't have the $500 per semester to pay at the University of Scranton where I had been admitted. So I went into the registered and volunteered for the draft, and it was simply 2 years. You didn't have to spend 3 or 4. 2 years, you would get the same benefit, the Korean benefit. And I got that actually only by about 3 months. I think 3 months after I was in, they stopped it. So I had money coming each month besides working when I was going to school. I was a commuter. I stayed at home. I did have money to buy a car. My family had never had a car before, so I was able to commute to school. And then after that, I had a good at the University of Scranton. It was a good education, especially when I found a couple Jesuits who were opposed to the concept of just war.
Okay, so I know from our previous conversations by email, uh, you at some point joined the United States Army. Tell me about
Right.
that.
Right. Well, that was in 1954 that I went into the army and did advanced infantry training, and was shipped off to Austria. And this was the winter of 1955. And of course, I loved just the look of Austria, just one of those beautiful countries. And we're in the mountains outside of Salzburg. And I volunteered to go into ski training and mountain climbing, which was the ski training was to start shortly, and then the mountain climbing would be May or June. When the master sergeant, Sergeant Adams, called me in and said, "Private Gilroy, I'm sorry to tell you that there's something happening." And we're closing the ski school and we're closing the mountain climbing school. And but he said, "You're going to be hearing from me." And a few days later, he told me that he had selected me to be one of the soldiers, the trade guard with the Russians for the last time in the international zone of Vienna. And I was pretty excited about that. We had and we got on a train and we had what they call gray passes, which were in French and English and in German and in Russian. And so we were stopped in Linz because that's where the Russian uh, sector was, in Linz, and Russian soldiers got on board to check our weapons. I was carrying a 45, and we had to have the clip out of it. We had M1s with this, and there could not be any ammo. And the young soldiers came by, and they didn't look much different from me. Here are these, individuals I thought should be growing horns, and they were kids, basically. They were like 17, 18, 19, 20 years old, maybe. So then we got into the international zone, and we had a full bird colonel, an American colonel, train us and tell us to go to a cobbler and get iron cleats on our boots so we would sound bad when we met those Russians. And he used pretty nasty words about the Russians. We were to look into the eyes of our Russian counterpart after 2 weeks of drill, knowing where we would be. We went over the whole thing like a football coach would go over, football plays. And we knew we would be standing just 10 or so feet away from our counterpart Russian, who would be in a line as we would be in a line. And in between us would be the Russian colonel and the American colonel, who would come into a manhole cover in the middle of Schönbrunn Palace, which was a good place for us to stomp our cleats on because it was all cobblestone. So it was sort of childish in a way, but we knew that our colonel was going to drop his salute before the Russian colonel to say it was the United States that ended the occupation of Austria. That would be the official end with the salute, with the bands playing on the Russian side, the American band playing. Avery Dulles and John Foster Dulles both were in the stands. This was big stuff. And I thought it was all, of course, the Americans that were doing it. It would be years later when I would learn in history that not so, that the Russians were the ones who wanted Austria as their buffer zone. But I looked at the counterpart, the young Russian who was looking at me, and he had the saddest eyes, and he had hair coming down under his steel pot, whereas we had our hair short, the look mean, look bad, like you find police officers today. So that was a change for me when I looked at him in his eyes and saw that he was probably, I was 19, soon to turn 20, and he was probably 17 if he was that. And again, uh, you know, I had been changed a bit in Linz and changed more there. And then finally at the University of Scranton with Richard McSorley, my mentor, a Jesuit who had survived corregidor and Japanese prison camps. I learned that whole idea of hate, as Martin Luther King has said, you can't drive out hate with hate. Only love can do that. And so that became then my process over the years, was to change from that hate that I was taught in elementary school and high school, in the military, and in the culture, in the American culture. So I've been off culture for quite a while, quite a few decades.
So it seems that your experience in Austria, facing those young Soviets, uh, was a sort of epiphany for you. Was that, could you call
Oh
it
yeah,
that?
oh, yeah, absolutely right. Yeah, and you're right. Soviets, they could have been from any number of, the republics at the time. But to me, they're all Russian because uh, we were taught to dislike not the Soviets, but the Russians. So, yeah, it was an epiphany for me. It was a change, but it wasn't instantaneous. It came over years of learning, and the Vietnam event eventually tipped the balance totally for me.
All right, tell me about Vietnam War. Um,
My major involvement became working. I was working with the Quakers, the Society of Friends. Philadelphia, of course, was only about 3 hours away from where I was teaching school in upstate New York at Maine Endwell High School. And so consequently, I joined the group called the Survivors, and they had their own film. In fact, the Quakers had their own film called The Survivors, and it was of war-injured Vietnamese children, children who had been machine gunned, mostly burned with napalm. And these children then became my focus. And I went to a hospital and asked them if they could be part of the hospital event. What I was saying was that I became a upstate director of a group that was known as the Society to Bring Back Vietnamese War Injured Children to the United States for Care. And I was able to assign a whole bunch of uh, hospital beds at Wilson Hospital, 20 beds, in fact, Wilson Hospital in Johnson City, New York. And then after that, I was able to uh, get to pediatricians who said that they would. A Dr. Bolin from Indwell, a Dr. Sugatan, Filipino American plastic surgeon. They're all excited about working on the children. And then Nixon, of course, blocked the whole transport of children. The MATS, the Military Air Transport Service, would no longer take Vietnamese children to the United States. Photographs of them were taken in hospitals in Hawaii and San Francisco where they were being treated. In Look magazine, Life magazine, had photographs on the front pages or the front cover of both magazines. So it became a bad propaganda. Or a good propaganda for the Nixon administration to say that they had their own doctors over there in Vietnam. So that was one of the first major lies that moved me. Eventually, when I saw bumper stickers saying "America, love it or leave it," I had to leave, and I took my family, my wife and 4 children, and we immigrated to Australia.
wow. Uh, Tell me about that. That's incredible. Love it or leave. I've had people tell me that, uh, and I too did leave, but it was a bit more complicated than just saying I'm going to leave. Anyway, you took your family and you immigrated to Australia, wife and 4 kids. Wow. Uh, First of all, why Australia? And then what the heck did you do down there?
Yeah. Well, I had gone to Syracuse. I had read in an educational magazine that Australia was looking for teachers. So I interviewed in Syracuse, and they said they had almost no hope that I would be hired. They're looking for single teachers or young married teachers, take them as a couple. So I gave that up as a thought, and just several days later, I got a call saying they liked what they had heard, and they would like to have me on. So I was I was given a stipend to help. I had four children. The youngest was 2 years old, and the oldest was 9. And so we went then. We took a very long flight, obviously, to Sydney, where we went into an immigration camp. We're all given green buttons and ate with people mostly from South Africa, from Scotland and Ireland. Keep in mind that the racism of Australia at that time was that it was the all-white policy, that they didn't take in people of color. That would change over the years, at least to some degree, I guess. But I was eventually assigned to a small school, a high school in Illawarra, which was mostly immigrant kids there that I had, because it was the an industrial area. I'd say coal, iron ore, Broken Hill Proprietary Company was the big company there that pretty much ruled the roost in that part of Australia. So I was able to fit in to a degree, but not totally, because I had been educated to use the Socratic method to try to get questions from the students rather than feeding them information, and feeding their little heads. And they had books there that most of the other teachers, the kids called it chalk and talk, but they filled their books with words that were put on the bill on the chalkboard by the teacher. And many of the teachers were really clever. They were good artists. They would do artistic drawings on the board, and the kids would put it in their books. I was not an artist, and I wasn't one for putting a lot of stuff on the chalkboard, but rather trying to engage with the kids. So when the inspectors came in from the New South Wales, that was the department, the New South Wales department was run out of Sydney. When they came in to do the inspection, they would want to look at the books. And they told me afterwards, John, they didn't call me Jack, John, these books, he said, are really not complete. Your children must have more in their books. And I just rejected all that. And before long, I had my kids raising a little bit of hell.
Oh, I love it. I love it. So, what kind of things were you involved in? I mean, you left the United States because you could not accept what the government was doing. Uh, were you tempted to be involved a little politically with some of your students? Uh,
Well, I guess culturally more than politically, a lot of the kids wanted to get out, Regis. They wanted to get out and get a job. At 14 years and 10 months, they would come up to me and say, Sir, I'm away tomorrow, sir, 14:10, sir. Sign my paper, sir. And you'd sign the paper and you never see the kid again. They would go and get a job. They would go to an apprenticeship. And a lot of them ended up doing very well as engineers and carpenters and plumbers, etc. It seemed to work okay for the Aussies. The kids who stayed very often were not all that interested, and I was trying to move them, get them excited about things. And one day I held up a newspaper. In one hand, I had the Australian Daily, and the other the Sydney Morning Herald. And I said, "Look at this." 1,500% increase in radiation from French nuclear explosions in the Pacific. What are you going to do about it? And they said, "What are we going to do? What are you going to do about it, sir?" I said, "Well, let's maybe call up the Australian embassy." So before long, I had this one little gal go down, and the office let her speak to someone in the embassy, and they said that the ambassador was not in. They would have to call the consul general in Sydney. So the little girl did, and before long, we had an appointment to meet with the consul general. Now, all the while, the principal, or the headmaster, he's called, was unaware of what was going on, but he did say, "What is it you're planning on, John, up in Sydney?" I said, "We're going to be up there to do something about pollution." "Oh," he said, "that's very good. That's very good." So after school, the kids stayed, and we made anti-French posters. We illustrated, for example, Devil's Island. We illustrated the attack on burning of Moscow and the attack on Russia in 1812, the Dreyfus Affair, the anti-Semitism of the French period. We made big posters like that, and then the kids made a scroll with an illustration. Do you disagree with nuclear weapons being exploded by the French? It is dangerous to children and other living things. And then they had this huge scroll. Then they went door to door and took names of people who said, "Sure, we'll sign that." And then I called the ABC or the IBC and the Sydney Herald, and the newspapers didn't show, but the radio did, and the TV people showed. So when we had the bus, the kids said they wanted to wear, didn't want to wear uniforms. The kids had to wear standard uniforms. So I told them that they would have to meet. We had to hire a bus. We raised the money to hire. There were no school buses, so I had them meet 2 blocks away, and they had their jeans on, and they loved that to be free doing that. So as the we approached the main street in Sydney. I'm forgetting now what Market Street. Uh, the tall buildings, etc., around. The kids said, "Sir, there's cameras and all." Right there in front of that building. So they were there to interview the kids. They interviewed me. They went up to I had 10 kids posted with signs to walk in opposition to the French along the education department that wasn't even aware of was also there, but the French embassy, or the French consulate, I should say, up to the 17th floor. Glass doors open in the elevator, and there is secretaries all over the place. The very kind gentleman, a French gentleman, came to the kids and myself and wanted to know what he could do for us. So the kids told him they should stop blowing up nuclear weapons, atomic bombs, they said, nuclear weapons in the Pacific Ocean. And he said, "Well, we can't do anything about that because we can't do it in the Mediterranean, that there are too many people there." And so the kids said, "Well, there are a lot of people here too." And they gave him the scroll with all of the names. And the Pompidou was at the time the prime minister. So he called over one of his secretaries and he rattled off in French a note to Pompidou. And she went over, and I think he was real about it, and he sent it off to France. Well, we went down and got back on the bus, and that night it was the top of the news of the Australian Broadcasting Company, and I was on the carpet the following day. I had no permission to do that. That this was absolutely wrong. That I was going to have to have an appointment. So I did eventually have a hearing with the New South Wales Education Department, and my headmaster was able to get me out of it, saying that, "Well, John doesn't really understand fully, but he's learning about the Australian method of education. And so he's doing a good job in school, and I think you should keep him on." So I had already been looking for jobs in Japan and Indonesia, so I was pretty well relieved.
Okay, so first of all, what were the years that you were in Australia, and then why did you leave? When and why did you leave?
72 and 73, and I enjoyed it. I didn't enjoy Australian educational system. If I did stay, I probably would have gotten into something else, because it was for me a dead end kind of. I was too always hassling them, and they were hassling me, and I just knew that I probably needed something different. But the main reason was that with 4 kids, with grandparents, aunts and uncles, cousins, friends in their little neighborhood where we lived, they wanted to be home. And so, but I did, I met a very good, became a good friend. He was actually probably CIA. He wouldn't say that he was. And he told me he was the information director, Carl Kuhn, his name was, the information director for Oceania, which is Australia, New Zealand, all that whole area of Polynesia. And he said that he thought it'd be a good idea if I showed our children a bit of Asia. And that was some of the best advice I had. Before long, I had a credit card. It was one of the first credit card that I had, an American Express. In fact, one day the maths teacher sent one of his kids over to me and asked me if I could have some of my plastic money to show his students. So I did. I went out of my wallet and I gave him my American Express card, and the teacher said, "Oh, that was so good. The kids didn't believe that you could." This is before, of course, the major use of credit cards. So I had a credit card, American Express, and I built up like over $5,000 in the trip back home. And they even were threatening to send up somebody from New York City 3 hours away to collect it. And I paid them. But that was a lot of money in terms of back then in 72. So this is 73. That was, probably 5, 6 times that amount. But we went to Indonesia, and I won't go into it, but I even got into Burma, which the Australians said, you'll never get into Burma because it's a socialist country. Well, I told them, I was a socialist and I wanted, I wanted to get in there. And by God, before long, we're in, we landed in Rangoon, and a pickup truck picks us up. Helene was with the youngest with her arms, and I was with the three back in the pickup truck going in. And that was a long story, but we were followed almost everywhere we went. We were suspect, and they had good reason to be at that time. They no Coca-Cola, nothing U.S. But that was an interesting trip in Burma. But we went to Karachi, and we had planned to go on a safari in Australia, but we did not have yellow fever shots, and we were turned down at the last minute. So we ended up getting into Italy and traveled through Europe and back home.
Wow. So back home was where? New York? And
Yeah,
what did you do?
back in New York. It's about an hour and half north of Scranton, about an hour and a half south of Syracuse, in a nice valley, the Susquehanna Valley, that starts at Cooperstown. The Baseball Hall of Fame is a tiny stream, and eventually flows down into the Chesapeake.
So
So we're right on that area.
what did you do when you got back? You didn't have a
Well,
job?
I was taken back by the school district, and when I came back, I got into basically anti-apartheid and anti-nuke actions with my students,
With your students? These were what, high school kids?
high school kids. Yeah. Well,
And
yeah.
and the school district, the school allowed you to.
Well, no, they didn't. But nevertheless, the kids were old enough, and many of them had their own cars or borrowed cars to do certain things. I knew I would. Everything you do, really, you're an educator. Everything you do is basically education. So I knew I would hassle them if I requested a bus to go up to the largest nuclear weapons plant in the world, really bigger than anything that the Soviets had at the time. This is the early 1980s. And I asked to take the students up. The government class was called Participation in Government. And they said it was too dangerous, even though, I was able to take them to New York City and various other places for activities. They couldn't go up there. So I told the kids if they wanted to get involved, that I was going to be participating in an action at the Cynic Army Depot to try to illustrate the danger, the real danger, the ultimate danger of nuclear weapons and nuclear war. And so it was right around the time that the Reagan was in, and Gorbachev and Reagan were back and forth, and the Soviets stopped testing for 6 months, and then it went 12 months. Reagan would not budge. It went 18 months. So I said, I think we've got to take some direct action to try to publicize this. So the students came up and they took a video camera with them. I didn't even know they had. I had a truck, and I drove one student who didn't have a ride, and I pulled into a bar, and I said, you wait here, I've got to go in. And I had a bag with me, and I came out, and I had a Santa Claus uniform on because it was December before Christmas. And he said, is that you, Mr. Gilroy? I said, yeah, it is. So I went up, and I had a bunch of leaflets to give to the workers, including the marshals inside, a statement saying, give up what you're doing and do something that is life enhancing, not something that is going to destroy life. And so I climbed over the fence. I had two other individuals with me, and we jumped down and immediately arrested. They knocked out the leaflets from my hand, etc. And we're into a van. Actually, there were five of us. There was one woman, three other guys, and myself. And we got driving into what they call the Q zone. I had been arrested there before, so I knew. And to the Q zone, and the driver was asked to give a report, and he said, "I have one female, three males, and Santa Claus." So I think they even got a little bit of humor out of the whole thing. But we made our point to a degree. The kids did their video. They would not give the local TV station the name of the person of their teacher. Basically, is what it was. So I was thankful to them for that, because I would have probably had serious problems with the school district over that.
All right. So, what got into you and when? Now, I know you left the United States, so that was a kind of a major statement. You didn't want to live there anymore. But what got into you to start going out there and protesting and, my God, getting arrested? Where did that come from?
Well, it came from a number of situations and factors, and I think a lot of it was Richard McSorley. Richard McSorley was a Jesuit scholastic, actually, in the Philippines in 1942. Remember when the Japanese hit Pearl Harbor? They also, of course, hit the Philippines, hit Singapore, and actually he wasn't in the death march, but he was in Corregidor and treated the prisoners. It was an awful time, of course. The American prisoners were treated brutally, and he eventually was sent to Japan and put in a prison camp there, and was there when the nuclear weapons were dropped. Later on, Richard McSorley, when he became a Jesuit, would write a book, two books that were important that I even used in class. One was "Kill?" for peace ? And the other, which I didn't use in my public school class, but I referred to, was making a nuclear weapon is a sin. So if I was in a religious school, I probably would have gotten into it. But I think the kids knew what it was, the immorality, the basic immorality of killing our sisters and brothers, and preparing. Just the simple act of preparing is not just sinful, it's basically immoral, and it should be obviously illegal.
Wow. So you're already heavy into, very committed to uh, exposing your students to uh, some very important moral and ethical issues in society and in the United States. Um, I'd like to know, um, was your focus because of the Jesuits, because of your Catholic background, that turned you against war and nuclear? I mean, just what was it that turned you? Because I know that at some point you got involved with a group that I was involved with, Pax Christi. Uh, but what was it that really turned you in this direction?
Well, I think again a number of factors, Regis. But coming from a family itself that was pretty much nonviolent, they weren't Quakers, they were Catholics, but there was such doubt and such question in their speech and their minds about conflict and war. And but what I think what really did is as I studied, as I tried to understand the message, the nonviolent message of Christ. It was disrupted by medieval doctors of the faith, Ambrose and Aquinas and Augustine, who all came up with a system of justifying war to support whatever nation, state, tribe, or whatever was in place at the time. And so these justifications I never really accepted. And I think it was Richard McSorley at the University of Scranton in philosophical psychology who showed that it's a farce to say that you're Christian and that you believe in killing your neighbors is just hypocritical. That is not what Christianity was about. It basically, and you learned. I understand that you were a Catholic priest at one time. I think you probably, however, didn't get that training either. That of nonviolence and of the love and the love your neighbors. That's not something that is. It may be in the New Testament, but you won't hear many if any, pastors in Catholic churches making a point of loving Iranians, loving Russians, loving North Koreans, loving the Chinese. That very often is just the opposite, where they either infer or by refusing to pray for these people in their weekly or daily prayers of the faithful, it's an indication that these are not important people. And so I gave up on that idea of using violence to stop violence, because I believe that the message of Christ was, and that is the meaning, of course, Pax Christi is peace of Christ. And so I still am a member of Pax Christi.
It's very interesting. Yeah. As you mentioned, I was a Catholic priest for 14 years. Uh, I studied in Rome under the Jesuits, and this was during 1968 to 72, so the Vietnam War. Uh, and this whole Catholic doctrine of just war, uh, I never bought that either, but it took me many years later uh, to come to the realization that so much of what I had been taught and so much of the theology that I had learned uh, really was a huge distraction from what you just talked about. The basic message of Jesus, uh, to love your neighbor as you love yourself, to not kill. Uh, and it was all about peace and justice. And today, uh, I wouldn't be surprised if you feel pretty much the same way. People ask me, well, are you a Christian? And my answer is, well, I very firmly believe in the radical Jesus and the very simple message that he preached. And it's a shame that so many churches, and not just of uh, Catholicism, but all through Protestantism and other religions, have lost that focus. Uh, so anyway, I was very interested on how you came to that. You came to it much earlier than I did. Um,
Well, I was
anyway,
influenced to a degree by Emmanuel McCarthy, who is a Eastern Rite Catholic priest. I think he ended up having something like 10 or 12 children, but with that Irish name, McCarthy. He's kind of an interesting guy. And I went to some of his retreats, and I since that time, since the 1980s, I've not considered myself not an RC, a Roman Catholic, but a PCC, pre-Constantinian Catholic, right? I prefer to go back to that. But that's another story as to why. But James Carroll's Constantine's Sword would be a good reference if anybody wants to get into it.
at some point, we will get deeper into a lot of these things we're talking about, uh, which is why I think I've found so much of your life and your experience and your evolution to be so interesting, at least from where I come from. Now, uh, with the time we have left, uh, you mentioned that you had written a novel. Uh, Tell me about uh, your life of writing novels. Did you write more than one? Uh, who did you write these novels for?
Okay, yeah, I actually I've written a number of plays, but I've only written two novels. And the first one, Absolute Flanagan, I mentioned previously, is really based on Carbondale, the coal town that I grew up in. And the crux of the story is a young man who wasn't me, and wasn't anyone that I knew of. A young man who is educated in Catholicism, hears all of the stories of the evil empires and all that business, and just is simply not buying it, and is a believer in the nonviolent Jesus Christ, and refuses to register for the draft during the great euphoria of World War II. And so it's a story. Then it's a historical novel. It was directed really toward teenagers, is who I was hoping would read it, and I hope maybe sometime they would be able to try it again. But that was the influence of that, and it was also writing the book was influenced by a World War I Catholic, Irish Catholic by the name of Ben Salmon, like the fish, Salmon. Ben Salmon was one of the only four Catholics who was a conscientious objector in World War I and was treated miserably, tortured, etc., by the United States prison system. So this was based really on the integrity of Ben Salmon, but it becomes now World War II. And it was also influenced by the Austrian Franz Jägenstätter. And Franz Jägenstätter, of course, refused to take the oath to Hitler. And as a Catholic, he was eventually executed, beheaded by the Nazis. So with Ben Salmon and Franz Jägenstätter, they were the guiding spirit as I tried to develop this character of Peter Flanagan, who went against the whole town, the church, the whole system, and eventually find some refuge with Dorothy Day, the Catholic worker in New York City. So that's basically that. The other novel is called The Wisdom Box, and that is also about refusing the military, about a young man who is the adopted son of a Catholic priest, an Austrian, who actually lives with a woman in Ithaca, New York, and secretly is married to her, but continues to practice, say mass, etc. And they adopt the young boy, and they have a difficulty. How do they raise him as a Catholic, as a Christian, or in the wife is a Unitarian? So that settles it. It's moral justice, and so the morality, just basic morality, without the Christian message, is the part of that particular novel.
Wow. Were these ever published? Were they ever sold?
Yeah, well, they were published when I was in prison. In fact, in Muskogee County Jail in Columbus, Georgia, in 2001, I heard that I received a check for $500 for. They were selected. Both of the novels had already been have been written but not published, and so that money helped me a bit along the way since they took my Social Security away from me when I was in prison, and I was there for 6 months. So they that 500 helped a little bit, but the bigger thing was that Binghamton University published both novels. It was the first novels they ever published, and they haven't ever since. And the story behind it was that it was a Muslim publisher at the time, and I don't think I would have had it published if it wasn't for this man who was. I think there was a lot of opposition to Binghamton University publishing them, but no one wrote them up. I tried to get an agent. They didn't want to touch that. The Viet or the It was 2001, 2002, really, and we were preparing for war. Already at war with the Afghans and building up for the war with Iraq, and no one wanted to listen to some story about not serving your country.
Wow. So I'm guessing that that neither of these novels are available today.
No, you'd have to go to Amazon, and I used to sell a lot at the School of the Americas outside of Fort Benning, and I went to some book fairs and sold them there, and I had a few teachers who did pick up San Diego, Ohio, places, but yeah, they're floating around, and probably you could pick them up for $1 somewhere. I don't know. I think they're more than that. If you go online, I think I did see where they're like $8 or $10. They're used books.
Yeah. All right. So two novels, but several plays. So you're a playwright now. When did you start this uh, career of being an author and a playwright? And then once you tell me that, tell me about these plays that you're writing. Who are they for?
Well, the first play actually that I wrote was for my ninth grade students at Maine Indian High School. Most of their parents were IBMers. IBM started in Endicott, New York, actually just walking distance from the school. And IBM, it was known that they were doing pretty well in South Africa in the 1970s and 1980s. I so I had the kids read about the prejudice, not just in the United States, but also in South Africa, the racism specifically. And I picked up a novel, or not a novel, a short story, and it was called Europeans Only. And that came from benches in parks in Cape Town and Johannesburg, where European, of course, meant white, obviously. There's a black man who sits in a European bench, and he is arrested by the police. I took that story and renamed it The Bench and took it to court, to a South African court. To go on trial where the individual young, and I had only 3 or 4 black kids, but one student was such a good actor, he took that role, and then we had other kids who were assigned as the prosecutor, defense, jury, judge, etc. And it worked out so well in our school. On the bench was the title of it, that the kids made a big banner on the bench. We attached it to a school bus, and we were able to take our story to other schools, other high schools, because again, it's all about education. So that was the first play that I wrote. But after that, I wrote plays about other individuals like Franz Jägenstätter, like Ben Salmon, a couple plays about drone pilots, killer drone pilots, both Predator drone and Reaper drone. So that's not a huge number, but enough to get around, and none to really make any money on. If it
So,
cost me more than you don't get paid for this sort of thing.
I get that. So, were these plays all written for high school students? I mean, were they the
No, the one was the on the bench was written, but the Predator, the first, well, before the Predator came, Franz Jägenstätter, which I understand it was played in a number of little towns out in the Midwest, in German populated areas, but our big shows were down at the School of the Americas in the Columbus, Georgia Coliseum, where we did it there, and it was basically a reading, a dramatized reading, and good attention, good crowds there. I mean, our plays now don't get that many; they're small. The plays that I'm writing now are played many times, many places, but there in Georgia, we did have good numbers, and so Franz, and then Ben Salmon, we had that was also done down there. Sentenced to Death for Not Killing was the title of that play, and uh, and then we did The Predator, which was 4 women. In The Predator, there's a woman drone pilot, a senator, United States senator from New York. It's Senator Gillibrand, really, who's the sidekick of Schumer, who is just an unbelievable supporter of the military and a super Zionist, that sort of thing. There was an activist involved in it. So we did this not just in Georgia, but eventually it was done at Duke University, Wittenberg University in Ohio, Syracuse, Georgetown. In fact, I did it the first time we did it was at Georgetown University. And I took along a big facsimile of a Predator drone and put it outside of the university, and kids would come by and say, "Man, that's cool, right?" I said, "You know what it's used for?" So, oh, well, I said, "You see those rockets? They were actually Nick Modern, who made the drone, said when you're driving to Georgia, make sure you cover over those rockets with the blankets because state troopers might see them and pick you up." Right? They were fake, of course, but he didn't want me to have any trouble on the way. So yeah, we got that play around to quite a few venues, and then the play that followed up on that is the one that is active now, that is called uh, so reap what you sow hyphen don't lose heart. exclamation point. And that's played in New York City. It's played upstate New York. We have the benefit of actor Martin Sheen being on our theater. We formed our own theater company, and Martin has given really good testimony to it. I've known Martin for some years since we were arrested together, and he knows the play and he's in support of it. So that's an ongoing play where we hope that it's going to get young people discussing issues that they usually don't discuss in class.
Wow. Jack, this has been a really interesting 1 hour, but only an introduction. Um, I'm so happy to be able to have given my audience, now your audience, a bit of an overview of who you are and what you've been up to. But there's so much more that I want to get into with you that we'll have to do on future shows. But for now, uh, thank you so much.
Blessings to you and all of your listeners, and praise God that the Americans will come to their senses and begin to appreciate the people of Russia, of Iran, of China, of North Korea, and the whole world. Let's work on that. You're doing it.